The raiders reached the lake by midday. They had already burned one homestead and expected another easy prize. Instead, they found a cold hearth, an open door, and empty fields. No cattle. No people hiding in the woods. The family was out on the water, safe behind a wooden wall on an island that hadn't existed a generation earlier. The raiders could see them. They could not reach them. Why would a farming family abandon a good house on solid ground and row out to a man-made heap of timber and stone in a cold Irish lake? Because that heap was the safest place in their world. We call these places crannogs, artificial islands built by hand in the shallows of lakes and rivers, one basket of rock and brushwood at a time. The Irish constructed somewhere between 1,200 and 2,000 of them, and they kept building, repairing, and living on them for well over 1,000 years. Long after the raiders in this story had turned to dust, families were still rowing out to islands their great-grandparents had piled up by hand. This is the story of who built them, how ordinary farming families turned open water into a fortress wall, and why this remarkable defense worked for more than a millennium. Hashtag Ireland. Around the year 600, there were no cities, no stone castles, and no single high king ruling the entire island. Ireland was divided into roughly 150 small kingdoms called tuatha, each with its own king, layered in a complex hierarchy of allegiance. People lived in extended family groups on scattered farms. Wealth wasn't measured in gold or land. It walked on four legs. Cattle were money. A person's status, bride price, and power were counted in cows. That created a dangerous reality. When your entire fortune could be driven away in an afternoon, vulnerability was constant. Cattle raiding wasn't just common, it was practically a national sport. It became the centerpiece of Ireland's greatest epic, the Táin Bó Cúailnge. Young warriors made their names by lifting neighbors' herds. Raiders often didn't stop at cattle. They took grain, tools, and people who could be sold or ransomed. There was no police, no central state, and no standing army. Each tuath could muster only a few dozen fighting men when the king called. The standard home reflected this world of trouble. Most families lived inside a ring fort, a circular earthen bank and ditch topped with a wooden palisade. More than 40,000 ring forts dotted the landscape. They worked well against casual thieves, acting as a fence to keep livestock in and opportunists out. But against a determined, larger raiding band, a bank of earth only bought minutes, not safety. When armed men came over the hill for your cattle, grain, and sometimes your children, what could you do? Run for the bog and lose everything? Stand and fight professionals? Or make yourself impossible to reach? The third choice built islands. Hashtag how to build a crannog. Imagine the shallow margin of a lake, perhaps waist deep, a stone's throw from shore. The builders began at the bottom. They drove rings of sharpened oak posts deep into the lake bed until they struck firm ground. Inside this wooden corset, they dumped everything they could carry. Stones from the fields, brushwood, timber, peat, clay, household rubbish, and even worn-out dugout canoes. Layer by layer, they built the mound upward until it broke the surface. The ring of posts wasn't decoration, it was structural engineering. It held the soft, unstable fill together and prevented the lake from eroding it away. On larger crannogs, they faced the base with stone walls to resist wave action. Some used interlocking timber joints so the structure could flex and hold under pressure from both the fill pushing outward and the water pushing inward. A typical crannog measured about 25 meters, 80 feet, across, and rose 1 to 2 meters above the water. Raising one required moving hundreds of tons of material by hand, in baskets and small boats. When Loch Garra in the northwest was drained in the 1950s, archaeologists found 31 dugout canoes around its islands, the pickup trucks of the era. Dendrochronology, tree ring dating, on preserved oak posts often dates construction to within a single year, revealing specific winters when families decided to build their own safety. Hashtag Stack, the power of water. A stone wall can be climbed, undermined, or smashed. Deep, cold water cannot. Attackers faced two terrible options: swim in armor toward defenders standing dry and ready, or cross a carefully engineered causeway. Most Crannogs had a narrow causeway of stone and timber, often submerged just below the surface and hidden from outsiders. Some zigzagged. Many were deliberately narrow, allowing only single-file passage. Defenders positioned the approach against a fortified gate, so the final steps were the deadliest. A handful of people on the island could hold off a much larger force because the water forced attackers to come one at a time, exposed exactly where the defenders wanted them. The grandest Crannogs sat in deeper water with no causeway at all, reachable only by boat. The family always controlled the water and got there first. Burning the empty shore farmhouse cost the raiders nothing. The family couldn't rebuild. Reaching the people on the island cost far more than most raiders were willing to pay. For quick profit cattle thieves, a fortified island in cold water was the opposite of easy. Most raiders took what they could on shore and moved on. When the alarm came, shouts or smoke on the horizon, the family drove cattle toward the water, loaded children and valuables into canoes, and pushed off. By the time raiders arrived, their targets were safe behind the palisade, with the lake acting like a closing door. Hashtag not just for farmers. Crannogs weren't only panic rooms for the poor. Some were royal seats. At Lagore, Loch Gabhair, in County Meath, south of the Hill of Tara, a Crannog served as the power center for the kings of southern Brega from the 7th to 10th centuries. Excavations in the 1930s uncovered fine metalwork, weapons, imported goods, and evidence of a royal court. The site was rebuilt multiple times and may have hosted judicial executions. The Irish annals frequently mention Crannogs, not as humble cottages, but as significant strongholds. They record their destruction, used as prisons, sieges, and even drownings during crossings. Crannogs were tools used across society. Kings held kingdoms from them. Farmers protected families through bad seasons. Hashtag astonishing longevity. Crannogs weren't invented in the medieval period. Some date back over 2,000 years to the Iron Age, and even the Bronze Age. Families reused, abandoned, and rebuilt the same islands across centuries whenever danger returned. One site at Rathenoan on Loch Garra was occupied in 3 separate periods. These structures, built without machines or modern mortar, have endured underwater for over 1,000 years, far longer than most modern houses. Their engineering was so effective that we still discover them intact when lakes are drained. Hashtag, why did they decline? Not because Ireland became peaceful. The nature of the threat changed. Starting with the Anglo-Norman invasion in 1169, conquerors built permanent stone castles and garrisons that stayed. Hiding for a few days no longer worked against an enemy that never left. A besieger could simply wait on the shore until hunger forced surrender. Even then, Crannogs didn't vanish quietly. Irish lords used them into the 16th century, and rebels sheltered on them as late as the 1600s. Gunpowder, systematic drainage, land surveys, and English conquest eventually made them obsolete. Lakes were lowered for farmland. Many islands disappeared under reeds or silt, becoming anonymous mounds or fairy tale places in local lore. Hashtag rediscovery. In the 19th and 20th centuries, massive drainage projects revealed them again. Loch Gara alone yielded around 300 crannog sites when drained in the 1950s. Today, the National Monument Service records well over 1,000, with new ones still being found, especially in the drumlin lakes of the Northwest and Midlands. You can visit reconstructions like at Craigonnowin in County Clare to see a crannog rebuilt the old way, palisade and all. Many more likely remain hidden beneath undrained waters or bogs. Their oak posts still sound in the dark. Crannogs represent one of Ireland's oldest and most ingenious building traditions. Ordinary people, with no army, no fortune, and no king's permission, decided that if the world wouldn't keep their families safe, they would build the safety themselves. We dig up the forgotten engineering the modern world walked away from. What buried or drowned structure should we investigate next? Drop your suggestions in the comments, subscribe, and let's keep digging.